Hello, everybody. My name is ProfRich, and today we're talking about plateauing or the intermediate plateau. That's the word plateau. So we can use plateau actually as a noun or a verb. And when it's used in a verb, plateauing, or have you plateaued? This is often used in the context of learning skills or learning languages. So many language learners are familiar with the idea of plateauing. You can see the definition here. Plateau, to reach a state or level of little or no growth, especially to stop increasing or progressing. And we have this thing called the intermediate plateau. This is when it feels like your English isn't improving as you hoped. And there are a number of reasons for this, but we can look at the psychology of what might be going on here. So look at this graph, and you can see at the start, progress is rather fast. So we have quite rapid progress at the start of our learning. Do you remember that? When you started learning English, maybe it felt like you learned quite a lot. So this is what happens at the start, the burst of beginner's progress. And then we have this bit in the middle. This is the intermediate plateau. And then you can see at the end, we have a kind of rocky road, a rocky road. So that's a road that's kind of like this, with rocks and lumps, a rocky road, the rocky road to advanced levels. And this is generally how language learners progress. And obviously, when you're in this middle bit, it feels very frustrating, like you're not progressing at all. Actually, you are progressing, but it can just seem very slow because it's hard to notice that progress. That's the real difficulty with the intermediate levels. It's very difficult to notice that you're progressing. So today we're going to talk about ways to overcome this intermediate plateau. When you feel that you've plateaued in language learning, how can you get beyond it? We're going to talk about some different ways that you can do that. May I just say hello to everybody in the chat. Hello to Pallavi. Hello, Pachu. Hello, Julia. Hello, Manuel. Hello, Dr. Archu. Hello, Pavia. Hello, Sleepwalker. And hello to everyone else who's joining us live or after the fact. So the first solution to this that we're going to talk about is interaction. Interaction. So according to the academic researcher Long, that's the guy's name, Michael Long, interaction is not only useful for learning a language, it's actually critical. So according to Michael Long, we need interaction in order to improve our language. So basically, Michael Long doesn't think that we can really get to advanced levels of language learning without interaction. And when I say interaction, I mean interacting with people. Of course, these days we could make some argument for interacting with artificial intelligence, but the ideal situation really is interaction with people. Not least of all because language is actually designed for communication between people. Language is designed for interaction with people. So, what sort of ways could you interact with people in English? How could that happen? Let's say that you're an English learner who's sitting at home with all of your grammar texts and study materials and so on. Where can you find people who can speak English with you and interact with you? Remember that interaction does not have to be real time, so we don't need it to be a face-to-face conversation. Of course, face-to-face conversations are very useful, but they also are very intense. Face-to-face conversations require a lot of mental processing, and there are some interactions which might be a little bit easier if your English isn't quite a high enough level for a strong face-to-face communicative interaction. So what things could we do to interact with people more? Well, a language exchange could be a good option. Now, these tend to be a little bit difficult for English learners because, of course, everyone's learning English. And so the question is, how can you find enough English speakers who are learning your language? The idea of a language exchange, by the way, is that you speak for 30 minutes in English and then you speak for 30 minutes in Spanish or whatever your language is. And the idea is that the native speaker of English who you're speaking with gives you some practice, and then you get to practice your language, the other person gets to practice the language they're learning, which is your language, right? So if you're Japanese and there's an English person learning Japanese, then you speak in 30 minutes in English and then 30 minutes in Japanese. And this was actually one of the primary activities that I did when I was learning Spanish. And it's probably one of the most useful things that I did back then. And bear in mind that back then, I didn't really know very much about language learning, actually. I had only just started teaching, and Spanish was the first language that I was learning. So I didn't really know very much about language learning back then, but I can say that language exchange was one of the best things that I did, and it's something that I would still recommend today. And a particularly nice way of doing it is making sure that you have a timed section in one language and timed section in the other language, so you're actually practicing both languages, and that you have a notebook to note down useful phrases and maybe even some corrections. Although I don't personally recommend focusing on corrections, language exchanges can be a good way of getting some error correction. So another thing you can do are special interest groups, and you can find these all over the internet. One place you can find them is Facebook groups. So Facebook has lots of special interest groups, like knitting, cooking, hiking, playing football, whatever. There's lots of special interest groups or forums on Facebook. And most of the time, these special interest groups use English as a common language. So if you find a special interest group, go on there, post some questions or post a situation about the special interest and get some interaction with other people. If you find that one forum isn't particularly friendly or you don't find a way to interact with it, then find another forum. Another possibility for this, by the way, is Reddit and subreddit groups. So if you go onto Reddit, they are all in English pretty much. I think they are all in English, actually. I'm not sure what the Reddit terms of service or rules are, but I think I've never seen a foreign language Reddit. I don't know if they have them. And that's a great way to interact in English. Remember, that's the idea here. We want to interact in English. It doesn't need to be speaking. It doesn't need to be face-to-face. We just need interaction. In other words, two-way communication. And then finally, classes like cooking, Pilates, etc. Depending on where you live, you may well find that there are classes in English. I mean, for example, where I live, you can find cooking classes in Ukrainian. So, and I live in England, so you can obviously find different language classes all over the world. So I'm sure that anyone who lives in a large city will be able to find classes in English. And of course, I don't mean language classes. I'm talking about cooking classes, sports classes, special interest classes, things like that. Learning another skill with English as the medium of instruction is a really excellent thing to do. It's heavily supported by literature and academia. There are many studies supporting this and different methodologies. One of the methodologies is called CLIL, which is Content Language Integrated Learning. And the other one is called EMI, which is English as a Medium of Instruction. And these are language learning methodologies where you go out, find something new to learn, but you learn it through English. For example, finding cooking classes where the instruction language is English. So there's some ideas of things that you could do in order to increase your interaction. So I want to ask you a question now, chat. Are you ready? Get ready to type your answers. What are some ways that you could interact with people more by using English? So what are some ways that you could interact with people more by using English? I don't really like the way that question is phrased, actually, so I'm going to change it. What are some ways that you could interact in English with people? Which you don't already do. Okay. What are some ways which you could interact in English with people which you don't already do? That's the question. All right, guys, let's see. What have you got to say about this? Pallavi says nobody uses Facebook these days. In the groups, they do. You're right. People don't use Facebook, but the groups, the Facebook groups, they do. Also, Facebook is making a comeback. Funnily enough, Pallavi, Facebook is making a comeback with young people because of Facebook Messenger. Because people prefer Facebook Messenger to WhatsApp. And so lots of people have started to use Facebook Messenger. Apps to practice with other learners. Can you name any specific apps, Sleepwalker? What sort of apps do you know for practicing language with other learners? Because that sounds kind of interesting. I think that's a good answer to that question, Manuel. I'm not sure if I particularly like the question, how old is everyone, Fahim? I think that could be a bit personal. I'll give an answer though. We have a wide range of ages listening to the channel. The majority are around 30, 40. So there's a lot of people who actually are my age who watch the channel. And then we have a high number of young people, that is teenagers, older teenagers, obviously, because YouTube doesn't allow young teens to have accounts. So older teenagers. And we have quite a high number of older people, 60, 70, these sorts of ages. So retirement ages. Actually, this channel in particular does have a high number of those compared to the average YouTube demographic. And also compared to the YouTube demographic, the gender balance of this channel is quite neutral. Most channels on YouTube have a greater number of men watching the channel by far. I think that men are about 80-20 in terms of the ratio of YouTube users. But on this channel, it's about 50-50. So we have about 50% men, 50% women watching the channel. That's what the demographics say. That's quite interesting, I would say. I suppose it's about the interest of learning a language. Tends to be more of a balanced issue in terms of gender. So we've got some great ideas coming up in the chat now. Participate in discussions on English language learning forums. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's good also to get away from the language learning communities. Just go and talk to English people on forums. You know, you don't need to stick around the language learning communities. Language learning communities can be useful, but also I think sometimes people focus a bit too much on the language. It's one of the problems actually I have with language classes where I will set the students a task, give them a question to discuss, and then when I go to monitor their discussion, I go to listen, and they're not answering the question, they're talking about the grammar of the question. And that happens a surprisingly high amount of time, especially with intermediate and advanced classes. And I think that's one of the problems of being together in a language learning community. It's like rather than communicating about the question, suddenly you're all talking about the language, the grammar, or the vocabulary. And that's slightly frustrating because that's not really a reflection of real life. Because if you were discussing that question outside of the context of a language learning classroom, you probably wouldn't talk about the grammar. You just answer the question. Like if it's a job interview or a seminar discussion, you just answer the question. You don't start talking about the grammar. So that would be one point that I would raise about the possible problems of staying with language learning communities specifically. English language book clubs where you can discuss novels or text. That sounds absolutely fantastic, Pavia. Do you do that? Or have you ever done that? Hello Talk. This is the app I practice. I heard a lot about it. So you've used that, have you? Hello Talk app. Oh, it's a language exchange app, Sleepwalker. That sounds great. That seems really cool. There's a new app called Civ. Okay. Using Instagram, I could interact with many teachers, but I still haven't spoken with any of them. Well, maybe you don't want to interact with teachers so much, you know? How about finding some, you know, normal people to interact with? The problem with teachers is it's very difficult for teachers to give you a real communication experience. Teachers are so, you know, we're so in our little teacher hat world. Sometimes it's difficult for us to give you that real communicative experience. What teachers are good at is giving you guidance, as I'm doing now. But if you're looking for a nice, real conversation in English, teachers are not always the best person for that. We can try, but we often go into teacher mode and then it's no longer a real experience, is it? It's kind of a different version, you know? It's like if you're learning boxing, the boxing trainer can help you with the pads, but it's not the same as having a real fight in the ring. So Pavia says join group classes where you can interact with both the students and the teacher and other students, indeed. I would say more you can interact with the students and you can ask questions or help from the teacher when you need it. Many teachers on YouTube have their WhatsApp groups. Yep, we have a Discord. It's a bit dead, I have to admit. It was quite active when we first opened it. Lots of people posted on the Discord, but it's kind of a graveyard at the moment. I don't know how or when it will kind of take off again, but I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it there. If the channel gains in significant popularity, then I think the Discord will also come alive again. And you can find me there. In fact, if you want to contact me, the Discord is probably the second best way. And the best way is my email address, my business email, ProfRich@gmail.com. That's specifically a good place to contact me if you're interested in classes, one-to-one classes. Shares stories or essays with friends on online platforms like Wattpad. Ooh, how interesting. That sounds pretty cool. And Sonia's signed up for a conversation course. I was thinking of doing one of those. Not conversation club, but a group class course. I wonder if you would be interested in that. Let me just try this. Sorry to kind of interrupt the lesson, but I'm going to ask a question to the chat. Also, by the way, if you're joining us from YouTube, make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe. This is the best damn place on the internet to learn English. And now, what was I doing? Oh, a poll in the chat. Oh, we already have a poll in the chat. It says, are you in a plateau? Yes. 63% say yes. Come on. Yeah, so I'm going to ask a quick question in the chat, which is, would you be interested in a English learning course in a ProfRich live English learning course online in a group with let's say 5 to 7 other learners? That would cost money, by the way. I'm not talking about a free course. I'm talking about paying for a course online of group classes. It's not something that I've offered on the channel before, but this would be a fixed course for about 3 months, and the meeting time would be the same every week, and you would pay at the start, and then with 5 to 7 other learners, we have group classes and we'll go through a curriculum. So it's like a course in a language school, not like a conversation club where we just come and talk about everything. This would be more, here's the topic for today, and this is what we're going to do, and here's some vocabulary and grammar, and we'll be looking at it like a class. So we'll see if you guys are interested in that. If so, that's something that we could try, probably starting at the end of November and going on until the end of February next year. Let's see what you say. Many multiplayer games like Apex Legends or Minecraft have voice and text chats. Yeah, that's true, Pavia. That can be good. However, sometimes you find yourself talking with 7-year-olds in Minecraft. So it's not always... The gaming community is wide-ranging, diverse, and also a little bit weird. So you do have to be a little bit careful with that. And Gus is here. How's the crystal meth going these days, Gus? I just think of Gus Fringy. Is it Gus Fringy from Breaking Bad? So if you want to practice, you can find different ways. That's right. Agree to disagree. I don't have time. That's okay. I just want an honest answer. Please just give an honest answer, because it would be significant effort to prepare the course. And if I prepare it, then obviously, you know, it would be nice to launch it as well. I keep making the same mistakes. I keep speaking with a simplified English that makes me sound less smart. That's super interesting. That's super interesting, actually, Gus. And we're going to talk about something like that a little bit later. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. So, we're going to talk about doing different things. One of the things that can happen with a learning plateau is that you're trying to do the same thing to get over the plateau. This happens most noticeably in things like weightlifting, where you can't increase the weight of the thing that you're lifting. And so, in order to get over that plateau, you need to try a different exercise. Like maybe in order to lift heavier weight, you actually need to do some running, or you need to train a muscle group which you haven't trained before. And this also applies to language learning, but on a more complex level. So doing different things actually is quite important. The academic who has studied a bit of this is Bjork. Try something totally new. So could you consider right now trying something completely new in your language learning? So if you focus on grammar, maybe you try something totally different. Like go completely away from grammar and go and listen to Kylie Minogue songs and writing down the words that she uses in the songs. Just something completely different to what you do now. So here's some ideas. Youglish is a good one. If you've never studied with Youglish, then I recommend trying that. That can be a very different, interesting, and new experience. Audiobooks and podcasts. I mean, if you're not listening to audiobooks or podcasts, why not? First of all, podcasts are huge right now. But I highly recommend audiobooks and podcasts. You can find many, many podcasts on YouTube, and you can also find podcasts on Spotify. The same goes for audiobooks. There's a lot of audiobooks on Spotify. Video games. Have you ever tried playing a video game in English? This is something that Pavia just mentioned above, talking about Minecraft and what was it? PUBG or something. So video games can be excellent, even single player video games. In fact, especially single player video games, because you can just sit down and, oh, I've just opened my Steam. I wanted to show you some video games. Hang on, just let me choose a video game from Steam here. Just to give you an example of something which might be totally unfamiliar to you, but would be very interesting to try. Yes, this is a good example. Okay. And make sure you do smash that like button. So this would be a very interesting game to try, especially if you've never played a game like this before. But this is an adventure game called Pentiment. And I think this would be a super cool game to play to learn some English. Obviously, the game is entirely in English. And you can see that, it's text-based. So it's mainly improving your reading, but it's interaction. Going back to what we said before, this actually is interaction because you're having to respond to what people say. So you have to read and understand what's going on. And it's just really interesting and probably a very sort of different activity for many of you. So this is the kind of thing that I would recommend trying if you've never done anything like that before. So yeah, this is a game called Pentiment. That would be a good option. And if I just find another one that's a bit out there, probably none of you have considered, going beyond the obvious like Minecraft and PUBG. Try and find something with some speech in there. So we're actually getting some listening. Oh yeah, that would be an excellent one. So there's this game, Sherlock Holmes, Crimes and Punishment. One of the best representations of Sherlock Holmes that I've seen, certainly in a video game, and it's a fantastic game. You can see it was made in 2014, so it's quite old, but it's much better than the new ones. So let me just play a bit of the advertisement from this game.
Watson. No, how?
I've just thought that the music might actually cause me to get copyright on the channel, so I have to be really careful with music. We'll just spin on a little bit and play a little bit more.
It is entirely my fault.
Don't be afraid. I would do anything.
Wow, I'm definitely going to get hit for copyright. This is the problem. You can't play advertisements because you get hit with copyrighted music. Anyway, it's a fantastic game. I wanted to show you some of the voice acting in this game because the voice acting is so good. The guy who does Sherlock Holmes, he just absolutely nails Sherlock Holmes. Oh, have we got one here? No, there's still music in it, so I can't do it. Yeah. What's this guy's name now who does the voice acting? Can't find it. It's Kerry something. But he's very, very good anyway, and I would highly recommend that. So that's an example of just doing something completely different. Who would think, would you guys think of doing that? Playing a game like that? Sherlock Holmes or Pentiment, just something totally different, completely different to anything you've tried before. Now, Pallavi actually says, I don't like games. And it's true. If you don't like playing games, obviously don't bother, right? Find something else. It's just a suggestion. So let's consider, also lyrics training. Do you guys know, do you know lyrics training? Have you tried it? So lyrics training, you can see there. Lyrics training is an app or website where you can basically play these songs like Let It Go. You choose your level, like advanced, and then you can go to write mode and you press play, you listen to the song, and you have to type the missing words in the song. It's super fun, and it's a super cool way of practicing English and learning the lyrics to a song. So I would recommend trying something like that. So those are just some ideas of things that are completely different that you can try to learn your language. So here's my question for you. What is something completely new or different you could do to improve your English? So ideas in the chat. What do you think? If you mean the website for video games, that's Steam. Steam. Steam is where you get video games on PC. If you like Sherlock Holmes, I highly recommend that game. The 2014 Sherlock Holmes, Crimes and Punishment. It's fantastic. Because also, the stories in that game are not from the books. They're new, and they're really good. They're well written. That's absolutely right, Gus. And that's the same for me. I don't understand all the words in Sherlock Holmes either. But you can follow the story because Arthur Conan Doyle is a really good writer. That's cool. That's a good way of learning. I totally agree, Manuel. Reading Sherlock is a must in English for sure. No, I think it's fine. Not everyone needs to like the same things as me. And actually, how boring that would be if if all of my students, all of the people who learn English with me were like video game fans. That'd be really boring. Actually, I find video game fans irritating sometimes. and also, and also, most of the time when I meet someone who likes video games, they don't like the same games as me. It's very rare that I find someone who likes the same games as me. That's a fantastic idea, Sleepwalker. So that is exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. Sleepwalker said, maybe trying to write poems in English would be something new. I totally agree. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about here. We're trying to do something that you just haven't tried before in English. And that's a perfect example of something which a lot of people maybe haven't tried. Yeah, definitely, Pavia. That is a genuine technique. It's something which I think is interesting and useful, and I do it in the class. So I do think that these kind of repetition drills can be useful, especially, Pavia, if you add in an element. For example, we add in an element. I say, okay, where are you going to go today? All right, repeat this question. Where are you going to go today? Where are you going to go today? Right, now, how many words are in the question? Type your answer in the chat. How many words are in that question? So the answer is 7. And that was the question. Where are you going to go today? Where are you going to go today? 7. Now, the reason why we have that little extra step of tell me how many words are in the question is that involves something, some cognitive engagement beyond mechanic repetition. So it means that it keeps us focused, basically. It keeps us focused on the task. Because if we're just repeating, sometimes we can get a bit lazy and we're not really focusing on the sounds and doing the task well. So then we do another task like that, which helps keep us engaged and focused on the task. Another thing you can do is you can write down the words after you hear them and then underline the stressed words. That's another thing you can do. Another thing you can do is listen, wait 5 seconds, then say it, then write it down, and then compare what you've written to the original words. Do you actually have the same? This helps if you have the script. So these kind of activities, when you're doing shadowing, can help to bring an added layer of cognitive depth to the activity. Totally agree, Ranit. I think that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, that can happen, Gus. I grew out of gaming when I was 28, and then I grew back into gaming when I was 35. One of my church friends is 75, and he's just started getting into gaming. 75. He plays action games, though. He plays first-person shooters. That's not my kind of game. But he likes the action. Oh, that sounds so fun. That's a great idea. That actually sounds really good fun. I should do that in class. What a fantastic idea, Pavia. Where did you get that from? That's great. It would just be such a fun activity to do in class. Oh, thank you very much, Sylvia. That's wonderful. Right, let's move on to the next topic. So this is kind of referencing what you were talking about before a little bit, Gus, which is don't worry about mistakes. Don't worry about mistakes. So this guy, Selinker, Larry Selinker, he's a famous linguist, and he came up with the idea of interlanguage. Interlanguage is an idea which has been in language learning since 1972. So this is old academic knowledge. Interlanguage is widely accepted. There are some people who don't like the idea, but most language teachers, most good language teachers, most academics accept the idea of interlanguage. So what is interlanguage? Interlanguage is we start from somewhere and we want to be like native L2, and everything that happens in between is a language which we call interlanguage. So what you speak is interlanguage. And basically, Selinker argued this is a perfectly legitimate form of communication. You don't need to have a perfect L2. You can continue to progress to L2, but interlanguage is a form of communication. He also showed everyone goes through interlanguage. When native speakers learn their first language, they also go through interlanguage, which is why native speakers, when learning their language, make many similar mistakes to language learners. Did you know that? Adult language learners make similar mistakes to native children learning a language. So, Selinker argues that interlanguage is a natural progression. In other words, mistakes are unavoidable. And in fact, they show interlanguage development. So if you are communicating in spite of your mistakes, then this is showing genuine interlanguage development. In other words, you are going through a natural phase in the progression of language learning. Mistakes are not something to be stigmatized or condemned. They are, in fact, unavoidable. You will make mistakes. So you might want to make less mistakes. And of course, everybody wants that. I myself want to make less mistakes. And I'm not talking about English necessarily. I'm talking about everything. But we all do make mistakes, and especially when we're speaking languages. One thing that I would like to do is to be able to speak without using fillers, like But even though I've been doing these streams for like 4 years, I've been streaming here in Oxford Online English for like 4 years now, right? And I still occasionally use fillers when I'm speaking. It's really frustrating, right? But at the end of the day, fillers to some extent are unavoidable. Maybe I can reduce them over time, but they're not something that you can really completely eliminate unless you try really hard. Maybe you can one day. And of course, we want to aim to eliminate them. We want to be perfect, but we have to accept that perfection is basically impossible. So fillers will still happen to me while I'm on stream live, and mistakes will still happen to you when you're speaking English. Just see them as a natural part of the process. It's not about desperately trying to eliminate mistakes, okay? That should never be your priority. You can aim to get rid of mistakes, but it's not your priority. Your priority is communication, fluency, interaction, meaning, and engagement. That's what you want to focus on. Okay? We've known this since the 1970s. So it's old knowledge. It's not even new knowledge. It's old linguistic knowledge that's well established. You don't use many fillers. You talk like a perfect robot. What are you talking about, Pallavi? Mistakes are inevitable by all means. Indeed. I wouldn't fossilize mistakes if I keep speaking. So this is a really interesting idea, Gus, this idea of fossilization. So the idea of fossilization came around about the same time, also in the 1970s. And fossilization is when you make a mistake that you don't realize is a mistake. That's fossilization. So one thing to realize here is if you make a mistake and you realize it's a mistake, that is not fossilization. So if you make a mistake and you realize that it's a mistake, that's not fossilization. That's just a mistake, right? But if you make a mistake and you don't realize it's a mistake, and it's a mistake that you keep making, that's fossilization, right? And then it's true that getting out fossilized errors can be difficult. However, something else that we notice, Gus, is that some forms of English are actually characterized by their fossilized mistakes. So, in other words, certain non-native accents can actually be known for a certain kind of mistake, which means they're no longer really a mistake. They're more a feature of that type of English, right? So that's another way to think about it. Like if there's a specific mistake which is really bothering you that you keep making, you might want to consider that it's actually something charming about your variety of English that you make this mistake. You know? I mean, that really happens quite a lot. One of the big examples of this, because it's been very heavily studied, is African American variety English. So, African American vernacular English contains a lot of interesting grammar, which traditionally we would consider incorrect or a mistake for standard English. But these days, it's something which is proudly used in African American variety English. And if you want to say that's a mistake, you better be damn careful because they are very sensitive to criticism of African American variety English in the United States. And you could very easily see yourself getting all kinds of accusations. So I'll try and give you some examples here. I don't care what he say, you gon' laugh. You gon' laugh. So instead of you are going to, they say you gon' laugh. Right? As long as I's kids around, he's gone play rough, or however they're playing. As long as I's kids around. Oh, it's is, isn't it? As long as his kids around. Is it is or I's? I don't even know. I don't speak African American variety English. But the point that I want to make is that this variety of English, which, you know, you can hear with like black rappers and, you know, just neighborhoods of black people in the United States, they speak like this. This is considered a valid, genuine, and correct form of English, which is very charming and in some cases desirable. For example, the white rapper Eminem, he spoke like this, right? In his interviews and stuff, he spoke African American variety English. That was part of his brand, you know, and also part of his background. He grew up in black neighborhoods and so on. So the point is that what you consider a mistake could actually be considered charming or pleasant by other people. So maybe you shouldn't beat yourself up so much about mistakes which characterize your variety of English. Okay, so another area that we can talk about here is guided learning in the form of the zone of proximal development, the ZPD. So this is one of the fundamental rationales of language teaching and teaching in general. So Vygotsky talks about the advantage of having a teacher is that when you work with a teacher, you can do more than you could on your own. And he said that this task of doing something more difficult with the help of a teacher is how you can get to the next level, right? So it's like if you have upper intermediate English, then on your own, you can do an upper intermediate task. But if you're working with me and we're in a class and I'm helping you, then you can do an advanced task. Like I can help you to do a task at advanced level. And by doing this again and again and again, then you get naturally to advanced level. So then you can do it on your own. And this is the idea of the ZPD, the zone of proximal development. That there's an area which shows things you can do with a teacher which you can't do on your own. The teacher helps you do those things, and that helps you get to the point where you can do those things without a teacher. Now, the point is here, you need a good teacher. So if you're looking for a private teacher, then you could ask them before the classes, say, are you aware of Vygotsky's ZPD, and do you use that in your classes? Could be an interesting question to ask. And if you get any answer that says something like no, or what's that, or any answer like that, then get a different teacher. Because basically, all teachers should know Vygotsky and the ZPD. All right, then we've got tasks, focusing on tasks. This is from Rod Ellis. Oh, hang on, we've got a question about the last one here from Pachu, who said, what is guided learning? So guided learning just means you are learning, but there's someone who is directing your learning, right? So it's another way of saying teaching. But the thing is, when we think of teaching, we think of a guy with a pen and a whiteboard, and he's writing on the whiteboard with the pen. But we want to get away from that, and we want to move instead to the idea where you're learning and I am helping to direct your learning. Yeah, you should. And if they don't know, then you say, you don't know, you're fired. No, don't say that. Don't say that. They should definitely know, though. Yep, they should know. Anyone who works in education as an instructor should know about Vygotsky and the ZPD. It's pretty fundamental. Right, so focusing on tasks, Rod Ellis. So I guess the first question is, what's this all about? So it's about real-world tasks, performing real-world tasks in English. Tasks help us in several areas. One of the areas where tasks help us is they help us to realize the areas we need to improve. In addition, tasks facilitate our language practice. So tasks give us a reason to talk English. Like we could just say, hey, Pavia, let's talk English together. Okay, that's kind of a task, but there's not really a lot of purpose to it. How about this? Hey, Pavia, let's design a restaurant and write a business plan for a restaurant together in English. Now, that's a real task and an interesting task and a task which would involve interaction in English. So some other examples of tasks here are inviting someone for a coffee. This is a task which would be like a beginner or A1 style task. Hey, Fred, how you doing? Not too bad, Rich. How about you? I'm good. Hey, I was thinking, do you fancy a coffee? When are you free? Oh, I'd love to have a coffee, actually. How about tomorrow at 5 o'clock? Oh, I can't do tomorrow at 5 o'clock. How about next week on Saturday? Oh, that'd be great for me. Let's do that. All right, where shall we meet? How about Starbucks or whatever, right? You get the idea. So that would be inviting someone for a coffee. Planning a holiday together. This would be like a B1 style task, like an intermediate task. So with this one, you need a map. You need some information about places to visit in a country. And then you sit down together and say, hey, should we go to Melbourne? Yeah, let's go to Melbourne. How many days? 3 days. Okay, what should we see in Melbourne? Let's see this, this, and this. Okay, where do we go after Melbourne? Let's go to Sydney. Okay, how will we get from Sydney to Melbourne? Right, you get the idea. Talk together about planning a holiday, and you get all kinds of language and vocabulary coming out. Another idea is discussing ideas about a party. This would be kind of, a sort of B2 level task. So, hey, Manuel, we need to talk about the party we're going to have. Oh, yeah, okay. Who are we going to invite? Well, I'm not so sure about that Pallavi. She's been asking some strange questions recently, so we'll have to think about that. How about Gus? Should we invite Gus? Yeah, he always talks about tacky things. I'm not sure if it's a good idea to invite Gus. Okay, whatever. We'll work out the guest list later. What food should we have at the party? Okay, you discuss ideas about having a party. And of course, debating topics. I'm not so sure about that. Oh, I pretty much agree with that, etc., etc. We all know about debates. Debates are one of the really common things that people do in language learning classes. But as it happens, they're awesome. And they definitely come under the umbrella of real world tasks that you can perform in English. So debates are a good one. So what are some tasks that you could do in English? Think about things which you haven't done in English before. What do you think? What do you think about that? Oh, I'm Horo Vestine. First of all, hello and welcome to the channel. I don't think I've seen you before. I can't wait to be fluent in English. Well, I hope that will happen one day. When you say fluent, do you mean fluent speaking or fluent listening? Because they are quite different things. By the way, do smash that like button and hit subscribe. How does Trinity College assess English speakers? So, Trinity oral exams are normally the kind of thing you do on a summer course, and they have a wide range of levels, not just A1, A2, B1, B2, but they actually have, I think, 10 or maybe more, maybe 12 levels. It's been a while since I've done Trinity, but there's many levels. And at each level, you have to demonstrate an added level of grammar. They're very grammar based, even the speaking, like you're speaking and you have to demonstrate present perfect continuous and past perfect and so on. And I find that a little bit frustrating, but that's how they do it anyway, Pachu. They're not the best speaking exams in the world, but they're really popular at summer schools because you can go up a level in 1 week of intensive study. So you can do like level 6 and then go up to like level 7 in 1 week or 2 weeks, which makes it perfect for a summer school. Yeah, that's it. That's a good one, Sleepwalker. I mean, that's a task, but it's also almost verging on being a game, isn't it? So there's many different formats that a debate can take, Pachu. You can have a formal debate and then you can have a discussion style debate. Personally, I prefer discussion style, but I think sometimes it's interesting to do a formal style just to have a contrast. So the way that I do debates in class is normally you will get like a number of cards like 6 cards, and on every card there's a statement. So you take a card, right, and you have a statement. The statement will say like, smoking should be banned in all public spaces, including parks. And then you look at that and you have to say, do you agree or disagree? And the other person has to say the opposite. So if you say, I agree, then the other person has to say, I disagree. And then you have a like a role play discussion about it. Yeah, I like cards. So sometimes, Gus, I get lazy and I just have like a printout with a list of statements. But I find that doesn't work as well. I have to admit, cards work much better. I don't know really why that is, but when you give just a big list of topics, a lot of students, they get through them very quickly, like finished, you know, and it's like that didn't work. So, but when you have the cards, they can take one and spend like 5 or 10 minutes on it and then go to the next one. So it just works better, the cards. So that's what I just explained, Pachu. But if you mean formal debate, I don't often do them. But if you want to do them, you can find some structures for those on the internet. A formal debate is when 2 people or 2 groups have a debate and there's a moderator and an audience. And the moderator, the audience, and the 2 debaters all have roles and times when they speak. So like the one person will talk, then the other person will respond, then the other person talks, and the other person responds. And sometimes the audience has an opportunity to ask questions. Normally, at the end of the debate, the audience will take a vote on which viewpoint they agree with. So that's a kind of formal debate. Now, I'm not talking about parliament debates, Pallavi. Parliament debates are just shouting at each other. I'm talking about more like academic debates, formal debates. Actually, I wouldn't worry too much about that, Sleepwalker. So hybridization of language is not really a massive issue. The one thing that I would say you may like, the one phonemic feature which is different between British and American that you probably want to have a clear stance on is the rhoticity of the language. So, in other words, teacher, teacher. So, do you say or right? That one, I think you want to be consistent. Most people are consistent on that, though, so it's not really a problem, right? You say computer or computer, right? Do you say or So you want to be pretty consistent on that one. But everything else, it's okay if you've got a bit of a mix. Like, let's take an example from me. I just said gotta. If you've gotta. That's actually American, that pronunciation. It's not perfectly American because the Americans would say gotta, right? Gotta. But I say gotta. But the fact I'm saying duh, gotta, that duh, that is an American sound. So the British would say gotta or even gotta. So they say gotta, gotta. But gotta is like, it's like half American, half British, right? But that's what I say. As an English teacher who has a few American friends, but not many, but I say that. That's what I say. That's my natural English, right? Gotta. And a lotta. Not a lotta or a lotta, but a lotta. So I think it's perfectly okay to have some features of American English in the way you speak. And it's becoming more and more common just because, you know, you watch TV and you have Americans speaking and British people speaking and whatever. It's all a bit mixed. So let's not worry too much about it. apart from the rhoticity. So yes, teacher or teacher, you decide on one. The other thing I would say is when you're writing for an assignment, you should try to use one standard form. Pavia says, how come we're getting questions already? Should we just move on to question time? All right, everybody, we're moving on to question time. Rich, can you provide some advice on how I can distinguish between different sounds, like and while writing the phonetic transcript of words? Sometimes it's perplexing. So, what I would say about this, Pavia, is that by doing this task, you are identifying areas where your phonemic knowledge of English could be improved. So, if you find it difficult to differentiate between and when you are transcribing, that actually indicates that your phonemic knowledge of those sounds could be better. So perhaps even when you're speaking, you could be making those kinds of errors where you yourself are using the wrong sound in those circumstances, right? Something that can make that a little bit trickier is that particularly sounds like and like and they can vary depending on the accent. So there is a bit of accent coming in to that sort of thing. I'm trying to think of an example. Yeah, so I suppose like the correct way of saying mother is like that. Mother. But you get some people in the southeast who say mother. And so instead of mother, they say mother with a instead of a, right? So there's that where there's a lot of crossover. Do we have crossover with the others? A and sorry, a and e, a and e. Mat, met, bet for a bat. No. I don't think we normally cross. There's much accent variation with a and e. Sorry, a and e, because there's such different sounds. Like hat, like had and head. They're so different, those words, that people often distinguish those sounds quite strongly. It's the it's the sound, which is a little bit more difficult, like must, must. Even for me, because I grew up in the north of England where we don't say the sound instead we say o. So in the north of England we say mother instead of mother. So you've got mother, and mother. And all of those are native variations of English. The Southeast, RP, and Northern. And if you're asking about how to get better at transcription in general, then probably the best possible way, Pavia, is sit together with some other people who are learning phonemics, listen to a phrase from a native speaker of English, and then everyone transcribes it, and then you compare your transcriptions. It's a great way to improve your phonemics. I did that a lot. Yeah, well, they're not really debates, are they, Pallavi? They're more sort of shouting competitions. The more I learn English, the more I think while speaking and worry about mistakes. How can I overcome this mindset? Wow, that's a brilliant question, Mohammed. That's a fantastic question. That is a fantastic question. first of all, I think recognizing that is a good step. Recognizing that you are self-monitoring and being too self-conscious about your mistakes is a very important step. You should also remember that saying nothing is the biggest mistake you can make. Far worse than any mistake when speaking is saying nothing, for a language learner, that is. So language, if you find yourself silent or you find your fluency is damaged by that mentality, then obviously you need to move away from worrying about mistakes. The other thing I would say, Mohammed, is step away from the grammar. Take a break from grammar. Stop learning grammar for a while, Do something else. You tell yourself this. You say, my focus for the next 3 months is fluency, which means I want to say as much as I can and have the other person understand me. That's it. So I say as much as I can and the other person understands me. And the higher level, the higher amount of things that I can say and the other person understands me, that's higher fluency. So the next conversation I have in English, I want to say as much as possible and the other person understands me. And I want to listen to as much as possible and I understand them. And that's it. So mistakes don't come into it. I don't care about mistakes, right? If I make 1,000 mistakes, but the other person understands everything I'm saying, then that's much better than making no mistakes, but I only say one thing instead of 1,000 things, right? So that's our objective. So you have that objective for 3 months where you're just going to totally let go of mistakes and then see where you are after that. See where you are. Focus on communicative objectives and meaning. Why am I in this conversation? What do I want from this conversation? What is my objective in this conversation? Why are we having this conversation? Do I want to learn something about you? Do I want to get your opinion on something? Do I want to tell you about something? What's my objective? Can I achieve that objective? That's the point. So let's just move away from this self-conscious idea that we're being judged on our English, because actually it's really not that important. I don't think that's I don't think that's a bad thing, Gus. Yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you can sometimes being a good communicator means using simple terms. If you really want to use more sophisticated language, then okay, you can do that. But I mean, what do you need to do that? Look out for the language you want to use. Make a note of the phrases when you see them, when it's interesting language you want to use, like tacky. Personalize it by writing some examples using the language which are true for you. Say the phrase out loud, and then the next time you have a conversation, try to use that phrase. Oh, that was a bit tacky. Oh, that was a bit tacky. Right? And that's how you can boost your active vocabulary with some more sophisticated language. But I just want to make it clear that I don't think it's a bad thing using simple terms to speak, actually. Because your goal is being understood. So the only case where it's a problem is when your terms are too simple and so you get misunderstood. That's when it's a problem. But there are many, many very famous communicators who are famously good communicators because of the simple language they use. Not everyone needs to be Nietzsche you know? We don't all need to speak in this very esoteric, kind of obtuse way, you know? Sometimes it can be nice just to be down to earth. So, yeah, I wouldn't consider it bad. But if you want to change it, there is a way to do that. If only it snowed. I wish it would snow. The first one expresses more. What's the word? Almost desperation. Yeah. Yeah. Like the first one, if only, like it can express kind of a bit more desperation. Whereas I wish is just kind of a desire. I wish it would snow. That'd be good. If only it snowed, you know? I ask strange questions. I ask anything, and my teachers were frustrated with me. Eh? What strange question? Did you ask a strange question? Oh, what about the debate? I don't think that's a strange question. I don't think you ask strange questions. I don't know who's saying that to you, but I don't think you ask strange questions, Balavi. I think you ask perfectly normal questions. There's nothing wrong with your questions. Keep asking your questions. I think you're a good questioner, actually, because you often have a question. And that's actually really a positive thing. Because lots of students, you know, they have questions, but they don't say it. But you have a question and you say it, which is good. So don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't ask the questions you ask. You should. And if they get frustrated, well, that's their problem. Be polite, obviously. Make sure you ask your questions in a polite way. And, you know, if the lecturer politely asks you, I'm sorry, we're not going to deal with that now another time, that's fine as well. But no one should be getting frustrated by someone asking questions. Questions are fantastic for classroom learning. It's the whole point. If we're not asking questions, we may as well just watch a video on YouTube without interaction, right? Why do I have a live stream? It's for the questions and interaction, right? So, yeah. All right, off he goes. Manuel Gordillo, have a lovely time. Yes, it is different, Sleepwalker. You don't need to remember both. You don't need to remember both. Just choose one, whichever you want. And as I said, you can mix. Mixing is all right. Like, for example, I use the American word for advertisement. That's American. Advertisement. That's American. Advertisement. In British English, they say advertisement, right? But I don't say that. I say advertisement. So it doesn't matter. Thank you, Manuel. Yes, it is. If anyone else would like to buy me a coffee, the link is down below the video to buy me a coffee. Thank you very much. It is appreciated. But of course, I appreciate you just watching, sharing, liking the video. Because the Americans and the British make most of the dictionaries, but you can get Canadian English Dictionary, Australian English Dictionary, and they do have the phonemics for those options. Oh, maybe I did, Pavia. I'm not sure. I did a video about a game called Contradiction, Spot the Liar, which is a fantastically fun British game, and I recommend that to everybody. But maybe I did one with Crime and Punishment as well. I love that game. Oh, it's so good. It's such a good game. Ah, well, that is interesting, Gus. So if that's the case, which by the way, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. If that is the case, that you see English as an art, then I'm not really sure why you don't speak, excuse me, in a more complex way. Because normally people who see English like that, they naturally acquire a more sophisticated vocabulary. So maybe for you, the problem is the way that you are acquiring vocabulary is not right. Maybe you need to try change how you are acquiring. So how are you acquiring vocabulary? What do you do to build your vocabulary? Because maybe it's not working and you need to try something else. So maybe you're listening to the wrong kind of thing, or maybe your vocabulary study is just not working for you. You need to try a different approach. So that could be the issue. If you really do want to, you know, speak like a poet in English, you can do it. I think it's a great thing to aim for. One of the best things you could probably do to start is to find some English speakers who speak in the way that you want to speak. So for me, about 10 years ago, that was Christopher Hitchens. I was obsessed with using the vernacular of Christopher Hitchens. And I did start speaking a lot like him because I listened to loads and loads and loads of his debates. And when you do that, you start to pick up the vocabulary and use it. Ha ha ha! Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I do. I love it. It's so funny. Let me put a link in the chat. Yeah. Oh. Okay, here we go. There you go. So there's a video. I've posted it in the chat. That's a video of me and Neil reacting to Mind Your Language. It's the first time I saw the show. So if you want to know, you can watch that. And even if I can find it here. Because we actually reacted to a few of the Mind Your Language style programs. Because did you know they actually made them in other countries as well, not just in the UK. Oh, I can't find it. Oh, here it is. So we also reacted to the Japanese version, and I think we reacted to some others as well. That's super fun. So if you want to know, watch that video. Basically, can you speak in American English? Oh, howdy, partner. The problem is when Americans do British and British do Americans, we do this like over the top characters, you know. We don't take. Not take, is it? We don't take. We don't take. How do they say take? Dick. It's like took, isn't it? We don't take kindly to. Come on, Rich. Will, looks like we got ourselves a reader. Will. Instead of well, they say will. This is in the South of the United States. Will, looks like we got ourselves a reader. Well, howdy, partner. Welcome to the good old USA. That's a caricature. I don't think anyone really speaks like that. Welcome to the good old United States of America. Talking about Pallavi and her interesting questions. It's funny you should say that, Pallavi. My exercise has fallen off recently. Why? Have you noticed? Am I looking a little bit like I don't exercise enough? I used to exercise quite a lot about 6 months ago. But now, nothing. Not very much. And I want to do some yoga or something. I've had enough doing other kinds of exercise. I want to do some like yoga and stuff. Yeah, it's funny. How to learn GRE vocabulary because they are difficult to learn. What's GRE vocabulary? Oh, Gus is an artist. I see. Well, the thing is, though, Gus, you have different types of artists, don't you? Because Ernest Hemingway is an artist, but he was not known for his eloquence. Ernest Hemingway did not write eloquently. He wrote prose in a succinct manner. So although he did have a very interesting vocabulary, he didn't use these like flowery, long, like J.R.R. Tolkien style sentences. So, there's different ways of artistic expression. Ooh, how to develop critical thinking or analytical skills. Just practice it, Pallavi. So the next time someone tells you something, you think to yourself, is this really true? Could it be false? And then have a think about it being false. So when someone tells you, you ask silly questions, don't ask questions, then think to yourself, is this really true? Could it be false? What evidence do I have that what they've said is false? And just do that with everything, and then your critical thinking will get a lot better. Scottish, Irish, and English. I'm not brilliant at accents, Sleepwalker. I need a model, Like if I have a model, then I can do it better. But if I just do it off my head, I'm not very good. He throws it together. He throws it together. Top of the morning to you. He throws it together, so he does, to be sure. That's my Irish. But he throws it together in the way that he does it. Top of the morning. Top of the morning to you. Just always say top of the morning to you. That's how you say it. That's how you do Irish. Top of the morning to you. Scottish. Hey, is it right, by the way? Is that right, by the way? Hey, laddie. Do you want to go down the loch? Is that right, by the way? That's my Glaswegian. Hey, is that right, by the way? Is that right, by the way? I hope there's no Scottish people watching. Oh, is that right, by the way? Oh, sleepwalker, is that right, by the way? What's the problem with yoga? Is that a problem? I used to do yoga. I did yoga for 2.5 years. Is that a problem for you? Graduate record examination system. I've never heard of it. Don't know anything about it, Pachu. Oh, that's so cool, Gus. That's a great way to improve your English. Yes. 2 billion, between 2 billion and 3 billion speakers right now. Oh, sorry, you're talking about Glaswegian. Is it right, by the way? Don't worry about it, Pachu. Most people don't talk like that. It's just when you have very strong accent, right? Like if you go to London, sorry, not London. If you go to Liverpool, right? Hey there, lad, where are you from? Do you want to go down the pub for a few bevies, lad? Did you see the football match? Did you see Gerrard? Did you see the goal by Gerrard? I always say the same thing. Do you want to go down the pub for a few bevies? I'm from Liverpool. Hey, lad, you ever been to Liverpool? Where you from, mate? Where you from? You from Spain or something like that? Where you from? That's very strong accent, Pachu. Most people don't talk like that. Okay, just very. Some people have very strong accents. It's the same in your own language, you know. I'm sure you can find people who speak Hindi or whatever who don't know, you know, how to speak stuff. So, there are 2 different traditional Scottish languages, Pavia. One of them is Scots, and Scots is the one where you say loch. I gae down to the loch, right? Loch, and loch is lake in Scots, right? Scots is not Gaelic. Gaelic is totally different, and it has no common ancestry with Scots. So Scots is the variety of English which we associate with Scotland. Hey, laddie, the loch, right? That's Scots. But then we have Gaelic, which is totally different. And there are some people in Scotland who speak Gaelic, but not very many. More people speak Scots, which is a form of English from the 17th century. So it's old, right? It's an old variety of English, but Gaelic is totally different. Gaelic is from like 1,000 or more years ago, and it's very different, and almost no one in Scotland speaks Gaelic. In Ireland, some people speak Gaelic, but not in Scotland, really. Just a very small amount of people speak Gaelic. So when we consider preserving old languages, Scottish people are more focused on Scots rather than Gaelic. Because actually quite a lot of people really speak Scots. Like you can go to a village in Scotland and you can find someone who speaks Scots. You want to hear it? Hmm. Ah. Okay, here's a good example. Are you ready? Let's listen. This is Scots.
Folk to blether together, fae hoik to thurso, fae brechin to unst. Ouija's, fifers, borderers, Doric speakers, and Angus folk like myself. We all grew up with Scots voices round about us, who were never encouraged to speak it. And we certainly didn't get to study it like we did English or maybe French at school.
So that's Scots. Did you hear that? Scots is a 17th century divergence from English, and that's the sort of native language of Scotland. It's not Gaelic. Gaelic is totally different, and basically no one speaks Gaelic, but people really do speak Scots. I'll play it again just for fun. By the way, I don't understand it. I understand like a little bit, but not very much.
Fifers, borderers, Doric speakers, and Angus folk like myself. We all grew up with Scots voices round about us, who were never encouraged to speak it. And we certainly didn't get to study it like we did English or maybe French at school.
So, like, I understood that bit. Like I said, I certainly didn't get to study it like we did English and French. I certainly didn't get to study it, right? So that sounds pretty English, right? So parts of it are like very English. It's not about improving their accents, Pachu. That's their language. That's their language, right? So that is the correct accent for their language. So yeah, they don't need to. But if they want to communicate with you, then they can use a more international form of English. And that's what you'll find happens. Like if you go and visit a village in Scotland, where they speak Scots or whatever, right? Then you'll go, hello, I speak English. Can you help me? Then they'll change. Aye, laddie, you go over there and have a look at the loch, right? They will talk like that for you. So it's okay. It's communication.
Scots Open University course, and those Scots things, and is Scots.
Let's have another one.
Garden, which is distinct in pronunciation from garden.
Oh, no thanks. Okay, whatever. All right, it's been very fun, everybody. Let's take a look at the poll in the chat. So apparently people are interested in group classes. So I'll have a little think about that, and maybe next time I will make an announcement about that. Thank you very much for joining me today. Make sure that you do smash that like button and hit subscribe. If you have any requests for future classes, you can post that down in the comments down below. I do wish everyone to have a lovely, lovely, lovely weekend. I hope you find time to relax, to study, to improve your English. And I hope that this stream in general has been very useful to you. Do go ahead and share it with anyone you know who is learning English, who you think might benefit from a stream such as this. And you can join me again next week, same time, probably. Saturday, might be a little bit late. I don't know. Take some time for yourself and enjoy your weekend. Thank you very much, everybody, and catch you later. Bye-bye.